Figures from March 2020 show that approximately 12% of classrooms in New South Wales public schools were in demountables. Governments consistently tell us that while demountables may not be ideal, they're not the demountables of yesteryear and they actually offer decent amenities. Well, if demountables really aren't that bad, why not make them available to private schools instead of splashing ever-increasing amounts of public money into ever more grand private school buildings? Why is it that public schools are always the ones that have to scrape by on scraps while the private sector gets more and more public funding? Gledswood Hill Public School in Sydney, a relatively new school which opened its gates in 2020, by 2021 had 13 demountables taking over their open fields, leaving kids with nowhere to play. Nearby, Oran Park Public School had 27 demountable classrooms as of last year. School populations are exploding, but the government is chucking $70 billion over the next 4 years into the private system. Of course, the private education sector will tell us that capital funding and recurrent funding are separate streams. The reality is that that's complete rubbish. Every dollar of public money given to a private school by the government offsets the cost of teacher wages and other recurrent expenses directly related to educating students. It also frees up money that the private school would otherwise have to spend on educating students, allowing them to spend money on capital works. Yet, despite the huge amount of money that governments provide to private schools, both in general funding and as capital works grants, the average independent school has raised their fees by over 50% in the last decade, and some as much as 80%. So much for the idea that funding private schools relieves pressure on fee-paying parents. And so we see story after story of largesse from the richest private schools in Australia. Plunge pools for headmasters, trips to watch a rowing race in England, a 50-metre Olympic pool because their 25-metre one wasn't quite good enough for the water polo team. To be clear, I believe that Australian students deserve those sorts of amenities. I want to live in a country where school kids, no matter their parents' income, have access to pools, auditoriums, state-of-the-art theatres, technology and excursions. When the rich private schools get public money while the public sector crumbles, that is a moral wrong. A greater proportion of federal funding for schools is now going to private schools, and that is worse than the Morrison government. At a time when our public schools are in dire need of adequate resourcing and upgrades, this is not only incredibly disappointing, it's disgraceful. Well, the Greens won't give up on our public school students and teachers, and we'll continue to fight for public money for our public schools.